Previously on the Epic Mickey Files.
On March 2013, Disney announced that they would make a reboot to Pete's Dragon, which will be written by Dave Lowery, who also made the Sundance film Ain't Them Bodies Saints. The only thing that's confirmed about the reboot is that it won't be a musical like the original, because, you know, we need more Disney reboots that'll fail to overshadow the original classic.
Whew, boy, man. You know, it's only been a few years ago, but already it just feels like time has certainly changed. And, you know, the funny thing is with that is that, you know, it actually really showed that I tried to give the movie a lot more credit just to shine a bit more light on Elliot for the sake of the files. But after watching it recently, I'm not sure if, classic would be the best way to describe it.
If anything, this would be categorized as the most stereotypical Disney film you can ever find. Hokey, over-the-top acting, spontaneous song and dance numbers that frequently happen, a goofy animated character, an overly whimsical tone, and the way it's made to be more cartoony than their cartoons. This is what people do to make fun of Disney films, not actually be one. However, I will give it credit that it's not necessarily a bad movie. I would say that the majority of people who worked on it did an excellent job. The sets look nice, the animation on Elliot led by Don Bluth is spectacular, the special effects are amazing, the choreography is well done, and the song Candle in the Water is a memorable highlight of this film. The movie did a lot of things right, maybe even some of the best they've done in that decade, but for everything else like the writing, the directing, and even the acting, there's just no way you could take any of this seriously. So when Disney would tell me that they want the dragon to turn him into one of their live-action reboots, well...
I want the dragon.
I guess the best way to sum it up is that you can absolutely tell that this is one of those post-Walt Disney films. Disney fans would know what I'm talking about. It's those weird and awkward films during the 70s after Walt Disney's death when the company was pretty much desperate to ask the question, oh, what would Walt would do instead of actually making a good product in itself? I mean, it's definitely not one of the worst movies of that era, but it is still way too over the top and way too whimsical, even by Disney standards. But now that we have the remake out, it actually really shows that they really do not want to go in that direction.
In fact, the movie takes away many elements from the original film, including the Gogans, Dr. Terminus, the town of Passamaquoddy, the lighthouse, Lampy, the whimsical tone, the musical numbers. Okay, you know what? It actually takes away about 99% of the 1977 film. I wouldn't even be surprised if this began as a completely original script and one of the Disney executives was like,
Hold on a minute. A green dragon that turns invisible? Don't we already have one of those? That actually sounds familiar.
Well, sir, I kind of based this off of Pete's Dragon.
Oh, yes! Pete's Dragon, that is true! We do own that. Well, I like this enough. Let's go and turn this into a Pete's Dragon remake.
Hey, wait a minute. What are you gonna do with my script?
Nah, don't worry about it. Don't worry. We're not gonna change anything from this. All we're gonna do is that we're just gonna change the names of the main characters to Pete and Elliot, and we're just gonna call this Pete's Dragon. Don't worry, your work is safe.
Oh, well, I suppose that's okay.
Perfect! Oh, and one more thing. Are you familiar with that chick that just joined the Jurassic Park reboot?
So yeah, since I don't really have anything to compare the original with, for the rest of the review, I'm not even gonna call this Pete's Dragon. In fact, the boy is now Paul, and the dragon is Ernie. There you go. Welcome to my review of Paul's Dragon.
So yeah, basically, we're dealing with one of those remakes or adaptations. You know, the ones that even though they do share the title with whatever it's based on, it actually has little to nothing to do with it. It's very common with movies based on children's books. But even though that it absolutely shows it doesn't want to be an adaptation whatsoever, how is the movie on its own?
Well, if I can be honest, out of all the Disney films I've seen, this is probably the safest film they made. And by that, I mean it took very few risks. Since it strips away many parts of what made the original film unique, it decided to mainly put its focus on just Paul and Ernie, especially with their origins on where they came from and how they got together. As it took away any sort of whimsy here, it presents Paul as a more tragic figure who lost his parents in a car accident, and Ernie as a town legend, which in its favor does make it more believable than the original. In fact, one thing that it does better is how the film presents Paul over how the other presents Pete. In here, the kid is a lot more believable. Not just written-wise, but also Oaks Fegley does give a more genuine performance that also shows a bit of a Tarzan flair to Paul, and we gradually see how he can form a relationship with the other characters like Natalie and Grace.
Are you my imaginary friend too? I'm real. So is Elliot.
As for Ernie, instead of acting like a bumbling cartoon character, he's more like a dog, and with the relationship that Paul and Ernie have together, it shares a bit more similarities to Pixar's The Good Dinosaur than with Pete's Dragon, complete with a little boy and a giant green creature where one of them acts like a dog. All that's left is for Paul to leave his mark on the silo. But speaking of Ernie, sure, he looks nothing like Elliot, but I will admit that the effects done on him are pretty nice. Surprisingly enough though, he's the only thing that stands out in the special effects. One of the best things about Pete's Dragon is all the practical effects done whenever something happens around Elliot while he's invisible. But in here, all they did is just animate and be creative the best way they can with Ernie, and that's it. It's not like The Jungle Book where everything except for Mowgli was incredibly made digitally, but then again, I can give this a pass since it was made a lot cheaper than Disney's other live-action remakes.
Well, at least it's good to know that it did something right, despite not even trying to adapt the movie that it's based on. But then again, I think I can understand why. But like I said before, the movie really does try to play it safe. So much so that, well, I'll be honest, what's there really worth remembering about?
Other than Paul and Ernie, the movie doesn't really have anything else to offer. I understand that the story has to stick with the boy and his supernatural friend trope that's been done in films like E.T. and The Iron Giant, but that's all that the story is. It follows the formula page by page where the movie becomes easily predictable, and what's worse is how there's barely any sense of danger. There was no instance whatsoever where I felt like any of the characters were in peril. Even with Paul at the beginning with the car accident, it got completely crashed and turned upside down, yet somehow he came out perfectly fine. Let me just pick up my book of Elliot Got Lost and I'll merrily be on my adventure. Also, with a generic story like this, it makes the other characters generic as well. You know the ones included: the adult believer, the adult non-believer, the friend, the villain, and all those others in the town. There's nothing really bad that makes me hate them. They're just forgettable, with the actors giving out a decent performance, I guess. Like, Bryce Dallas Howard wasn't all that great here, but at least she did a better job than in Jurassic World.
He says he wasn't alone.
He drew this?
He says it's his friend.
If there is one big problem with this movie I have to pick out, it's easily the villain played by Carl Urban. It's not really the actor's fault in this case, but it feels like the movie didn't put much thought onto the guy. I kid you not, they made him as the selfish guy who got scared of Ernie and wants to capture him. So what does he want to do with the dragon?
I don't know. I never thought I'd get this far.
Seriously, even in the original, the villains want Elliot to chop him up for medicine. Could you please at least think about what you will do with a captured dragon?
I mean, wouldn't this be like writing or character development 101 to give your villain a motive for his actions? Instead of, like just make him a jerk throughout the movie and let the audience guess for themselves who you're not supposed to root for. But then again, I'm not gonna harp on it too much since it actually is just the only crime that this movie commit. With everything else, well, it's passable.
Paul's Dragon is the definitive film that is just okay. The acting is okay. The writing is okay. The effects are okay. The characters are okay. So overall, it's okay. Despite being absolutely nothing like the 1977 film other than the title and the names of the main characters, it is capable of standing as its own movie. Debatably, some could even say that this is better, but just slightly. Sure, it doesn't take as much risks as other films, and it can have its dull moments, but there's nothing worth hating about the film. If you're gonna come in expecting anything from the original Pete's Dragon, you're gonna be rather disappointed. However, this does make a pretty good family rental, if anything. There's no real risk if you choose to watch it. At best, it'll be good. At worst, it'll be forgettable. And as an okay movie, I will give this a 6 out of 10. Not the best movie Disney released in that year like Zootopia, but at least it's better than Alice Through the Looking Glass.
If someone would actually give me the option to go watch either Pete's Dragon or the remake, I would actually go with the original. I mean, here's the thing. By the time you're watching this, I might have actually forgotten everything that I have seen from Pete's Dragon because there really isn't anything that stood out. With the original film though, sure, it is stupid. It is way too whimsical. It is absolutely over the top, but at the very least, that's what gives this movie an identity. And I think that's the beauty of what the original did, and that's what really made it stand out. It has its own identity we can easily recognize. That, and also we have a drunken Mickey Rooney freaking out all the time.
That's all I need is the dragon in here. Ah! Ah!
How can I say no to that? See you later, dudes!
He's both a fish and a mammal, and I hope he'll never change.